Okay, thank you. Thank you for coming. This is a special display put on by the St. Genevieve Art Guild in the St. Genevieve Art Guild Art Center and Museum. My name's Carolyn Bach. I'm the president of the Art Guild, and this show is a retrospective look at one of the art colony artists that was here in the 1930s. His name is Joseph P. Vorst, and his journey in coming here and making of an American scene painter is what we're all about today. And the exhibit moves off to the left here. And here we have a portrait of him a little later on, and the two studios that he had. He had a studio in St. Louis for business reasons, but he moved later to a larger house. And the studio has been preserved by the family. And we're very indebted to the Vorst family. The Vorst family came down for the opening and were here. All the grandchildren came. This is a scene here of a family image. This is Vorst's wife. Her name was Lena, and this is the one son they had. They had one child named Carl. And it was Carl's family that was here during the opening. Carl passed away in 2021. And his wife, Carol, contacted us about doing an exhibit of his work that is all work that belongs to the family. And so this art here is on loan from the family. None of it was brought here for sale or any other reason. They wanted to honor Joseph P. Vorst. Apple Butter Time could be considered a typical Depression era scene of the American scene painting. He also painted from photographs, and this camera was with him in many, many cases. He carried it in a case across his shoulder, and he would photograph whatever it was that he thought he wanted to portray in a painting. And during this era, a lot of what was portrayed were workers. And so kind of a happy accident was that we found photographs. The family had 2 bins of photographs that hadn't been looked at for probably decades. And our historian, Anna Kirchner, went through the photographs and she found many. This is an example here of the photograph. They were rather curled up because of the process of he developed his own film, and he was an accomplished photographer. We found when Anna was looking through them many scenes of St. Genevieve, like this one, and many scenes that were reference material for his art. And so, in addition to the art that we have here, we have a lot of photographs, and those photographs portray people at work. They portray some of the hard times during the Depression, and we were lucky also to have some of our members who had artifacts. The family here of our vice president, Juanita Wyman, had a cotton farm. Her grandfather had a cotton farm down in the Boot Heel. And so these photographs were supported by some artifacts she had. And this was a mural that he did much later. I'll talk about mural paintings as we go along. But the scene here of this particular scale is the same scale that you see in the window here. The same type of scale, and it was painted from a photograph. The other scenes that we have are working people, people who were engaged in one type of manual labor or another. We have a blacksmith here. We found these pictures of people working in St. Genevieve who were actually building what is now the middle school during the WPA era. Joseph Vorst was also very keen in portraying people who were disadvantaged in some way. During the Depression, workers of all kinds were disadvantaged, but he particularly wanted to portray African Americans in a lot of his work, and that this lady is ironing, and yet she's portrayed with dignity and respect in terms of what she's doing. It's, again, supported by some of our local artifacts. This is Strawberry Pickers. This is owned by one of the Vorst children, and it portrays a rural scene. One of the notable things about it is that men and women are working as equals. It is a very regionalist painting. It should remind you, if you're familiar with Thomas Hart Benton's work, it has some of that feel to it. But again, he was using photographs to portray. Now in this particular case, this is Strawberry Pickers. He also did Strawberry Pickers as a lithograph. And a lithograph was a way of making a print, but the print wasn't original. And so because of the Depression, selling a painting like that was very difficult. But he could make a lithograph and sell it for about $5. So that was a way to support his art. And this was something that he was very versed in doing from his time in Germany. He came here as a German immigrant in 1930. And the first thing he did was to make contact while he was still in Germany with the family here. And that family here was the owners of the Southern Hotel. And the Southern Hotel at that time, the family also owned a livery stable and several houses. And so it was that family connection that brought him here to St. Genevieve. And it was also that family connection with Matthew Ziegler, who was his cousin, whose family owned a farm that had mules. And we'll talk about mules a little more later too. But this particular mule is an albino mule. 1 in 10,000 are born albino. And this mule caught Vorst's attention. He had never seen mules before. He was fascinated by them. And so they became a subject of his artwork. And the mule here could be considered a symbol for the people of Missouri who were caught in this terrible flood of 1937. This was a devastating flood that started on the Ohio River. It affected people down at the Boot Hill area, more so than here in St. Genevieve. And it had billions of dollars in damage. Hundreds of people perished. And it was a very, very significant tragedy during the time that Vorst was here. And so it made quite an impact on him. And so flood scenes continue to appear in some of his work as we go. Here are some more lithographs, again belonging to the family, with the theme again of the river. This is fishermen on the Mississippi. And people made their livelihood along the river in whatever way they could during the Depression. Steamboats were quite prevalent. Floodwaters, again, depicts the tragedy. Thomas Hart Benton was sent by the Kansas City Star to document all of these things. And he said there were somber-faced women looking up the rooftops out in the water, and you know how desperate that must have been for them to figure out that that was their whole future, was cleaning up this mess that had been caused by the river overflowing. It was a very, very difficult time. Again, Missouri Annual portrays the same theme. He kept coming back to this theme. It made such an impact on him. Here, Missouri Annual implies that these are the floods that came down the Mississippi. And the railroad tracks, of course, run along the Mississippi all the way down. And again, a woman in a bonnet thinking about what her future holds following this disaster. On the other side of the water was a dry riverbed. We know this is the St. Genevieve Ferry landing, and we have pictures that portray the dried riverbed, because after the floods came a searing drought. And the clouds of dust back there are part of the Dust Bowl. We think of Oklahoma and those areas as the Dust Bowl, but the Dust Bowl affected the entire Midwest. And it parched the ground, ruined the crops. People had a really hard time. Returning to the flood theme, this painting is called Hope Alone Remains, and the family tells us this was his very last painting. And what's interesting about it is he's actually carved into it occasionally with the end of his brush and made lines in it just to emphasize the theme. This was part of what we called the social realist movement, because it wasn't just regionalism, it wasn't just people out in working times. This was actually talking about a tragedy. This was talking about people in dire straits. So social realism kind of went the next step into telling a story with your paintings and your art. The working class was the subject of the American scene painting. And one of the things that we discovered was Matthew Ziegler was key in taking Vorst to some of the places around St. Genevieve that had subject matter of people working. Of course, he went to all the fields and the farms and that sort of thing, but the Ozora marble quarry ended up being something that Vorst painted. We couldn't get this painting, so we have it's owned by someone else, and it's a reproduction of it. But you can see how closely it follows the photographs of the marble quarry. This marble piece was taken from the marble quarry. It's been polished, but this was a representative of marble from the quarry that was actually used in Washington, D.C. in the National Archives. The marble here was very fine. It was very important industry. The quarry was operational up until 1943, so it was active during the period that the colony painting was going on. This painting here, Driftwood, rather somber scene with all the dark clouds. Of course, we have to have a couple of mules in the picture. Very, very active brushwork. And we think perhaps that the pine cone is sort of a symbol of hope in that picture, that the next generation will bring better times. But during the art colony's stay here, the marble quarry had a different function as well, because the marble quarry provided air conditioning. It sounds crazy, but during that period of the drought, the temperature soared to like 108 degrees in the summer of 1936. And the art colony people that were down here on the weekends would go for a picnic in the marble quarry. Again, Matthew Ziegler was probably key in getting that happening, but we have pictures of the art colony artists in the marble quarry with Joe Vorst and his camera, so it's kind of an interesting aside. This particular piece here is an example of what Vorst did. He did everything. He did paintings, drawings, murals, sculpture, etchings, linoleum cuts, and the photographs and lithographs we've already talked about. But he used the photography, and he had work in a printmaking. And so this was all things that he did as an offshoot of what he had learned in Germany. But the art colony was very pivotal in Vorst's career. He met so many people here, particularly his friendship with Thomas Hart Benton. This was shows you how central he was. This is Amy Schweg, and she's the person who's the leader of the art colony and the Summer School of Art in 1936. And here the three of them are together talking. This photo was taken by one of the students in the class named Millard Chrisman. But on the left there is also some information about a little cartoon sent to Vorst from Thomas Hart Benton, and then in turn he did a little montage of the Benton family and as a gift to Thomas Hart Benton. So the two were good friends. They were kind of an unlikely pair, but yet Vorst was known as the philosopher, and he had seen so much of life before he came here. He had been a soldier in World War I when he was a young man. He had seen what happened in Germany with the rise of the Nazis and Hitler. He didn't like it. It was not what he wanted. He wanted very much the freedom of America. And so all of his life experiences led him to be more than just an artist. He was very much a student of the world. And he brought that knowledge and that perspective with him. There's some more pictures over here, again taken by Millard Chrisman, of some of the other colony members. And these are some of the best pictures we have from that era, because there just weren't a lot. And again, we're indebted to Vorst for having taken so many photos that are relevant to us. Over here we have a glimpse of the tragedy of World War II. And one of his most famous paintings is this one of, this is a lithograph of a painting of a man praying. And on the floor you can see that the newspaper says Yanks in the Reich, meaning that they're fighting in Germany. The star in the window means he has a son in the war, and he's praying for his relief that he's not going to be a victim of that terrible war. The war had a very strong effect on Joseph Vorst personally, because he had brothers who had joined the Nazi Party that he hated so much. And one of those brothers, ironically, was captured and sent to a prison camp in Arkansas. And we learned that from this Christmas card that he had sent to Matt Ziegler. It says, "Dear Matt," and it talks about the fact that his brother is in a POW camp. And he painted this picture of his brother, and the face is just haunting. That the tragedy of war just was a terrible thing. So that was an episode in his life that added to his experiences. Over here we have some of the techniques that he used. This probably won't show up very well, but it's a zinc plate. And there's 4 sections of it, and it was used to make the lithographs. And you can faintly see the horses here or the horses there. So this would have been inked, and then paper pressed to it, and then the paper pulled away. And this was the process of making a lithograph. And of course the lithographs are, each one comes out a little differently. And so it's considered an original piece of art to have a lithograph. Again, we have more different photos supporting that. And we have another one of his cameras that he used. Now this camera is a lot older. It was one he brought with him from Germany. But he used it to make another type of printing. And that was to take the photo negative and attach it to a copper plate. And that became etched and inked and became something that was a way of reproducing art that he could sell either as a small card or as a print of some kind. Over here we have quite the connection to Matt Ziegler. This is kind of a tribute to the 2 cousins. Vorst would come down here every summer and spend time on the farm. It was about a mile out of town that the Ziegler family owned. And so this particular lithograph is very, very evocative of that farm experience. Here again we have the white mule, and we have a reference photo that was taken that supports that. And we were so taken with this particular one that the Vorst family has donated that to the Art Guild. And we're very pleased about that, because we didn't have something in our art colony collection that represented Joseph Vorst, and now we do. So that's a very significant addition that we appreciate very much. Matt Ziegler helped Vorst a lot. He helped him when he first got here, kind of learn the ropes about being a new American. And in turn, Vorst helped Matt. The picture we have there is Matt and Joe in New York, and Joe was actually responsible for getting Matt's art in some New York galleries. So that's a big deal for an artist to be able to show in other galleries. Again, a tribute to the mules. The mules are portrayed in all of the photographs being used for everything. It's amazing how versatile they were and how necessary to farming of all kinds during that time. And we're grateful to Anna for loaning us some of the apparatus that went with that whole scene. It really did add to the show to have the actual props of some of the things that are shown in the photographs. The next section we have has to do with murals. The federal government, because of the widespread unemployment among artists, started a program, the Public Works Art Project. And we have a Public Works here in St. Genevieve from that program that's in our post office, which was done by Martial, who was one of the artists portrayed in those photographs. But this was a major deal for Joe Vorst. He ended up winning 3 commissions, and he entered a whole lot of them. They were competitions, and so there was a committee that would decide if you won the competition or not. But he made a lot of art that was a mural submission, and these were more the regionalist style rather than the social realist. And typically this one here is of Bollinger County. You'll recognize the mill and the covered bridge as part of our area's landscape. So this particular one was called Corn Harvest, and that's in Vandalia, Missouri's post office. You can still see it there if you go to Vandalia. And the one to the right is called Time Out, and it's in Bethany, Missouri. Again, small town post offices that were constructed during the early 1940s, and that's when the post office murals were mostly awarded. And patriotically, Joe Vorst donated the proceeds of his mural operations to the war effort. He says, I was a token of my appreciation for the privilege of living as an American citizen in this great country of freedom of expression. And so he was very, very proud to be an American, and very, very important in his life to have come here. Sadly, he didn't live to see old age. He died when his son was only 3. The family had a history of not living very long. He died of a brain aneurysm. And so that happened in 1947, and it would be speculation as to what he might have accomplished had he lived longer, because what he did accomplish during his lifetime was pretty amazing. And so we're very, very pleased to have this exhibit here. We have it, as I said, at the behest of the Vorst family, but we don't very often get an opportunity to do an exhibit like this where we're featuring the art colony heritage that we're very proud of, because it takes a body of work to make something like this happen. And so we hope to do this again, but this particular exhibit has been 4 years in the making. And so it's kind of important to us to educate the public about the art colony legacy. It's part of our mission. And we, again, are very pleased to have had this opportunity. So thank you.